Good evening, everyone. My name is Anastina Wardlaw. I'm a crisis clinician with MassSupport and the host of today's event. It is a privilege and pleasure to welcome you here tonight to hear from our speakers on the important topic of keeping our kids safe online. A few logistical things. The content being discussed tonight is geared towards adults over the age of 18 and is not appropriate for children. Please place all questions into the Q&A and not the chat. There will be time at the end of the evening for panelists to answer some of your questions live, so keep the questions coming throughout the event. Your chat function and audio will be turned off. Resources along with the PowerPoint presentation will be emailed to you if you signed up via Zoom. Before we hear from the panelists, I'd like to tell you a little bit about MassSupport. MassSupport provides free counseling and support services for people of all ages in response to COVID-19. It is funded by the Federal Emergency Management Administration and managed in partnership between the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health and Riverside Trauma Center. We provide emotional support, coping strategies, resources to individuals, families, and schools. A central part of my work at MassSupport has been organizing town halls such as tonight. Each town hall is focused on how people have been impacted by COVID-19, either directly or indirectly. Tonight's topic came about after I read an article about the increase of online crimes against children since COVID started. As I researched further, I found out that here in Massachusetts, police are reporting that online crimes against children have more than doubled the usual referral rate since March of 2019. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have seen a 63% increase in cyber tip line reports and a 99% increase in online enticement reports since COVID started. These stats are very sobering. Clearly, this is something that we should all be concerned about. As a mother and educator, it is my firm belief that blanket restrictions on children's internet use prevent them from taking advantage of critical learning and skill development opportunities. As parents, guardians, and educators, we should focus on how to help children navigate the internet safely and responsibly. Education, along with technology solutions, are powerful tools to protect children from online risks. To that end, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our four panelists. Together, they will provide the education and resources we need to keep our kids safe. From Berkshire County, we have Nikita Bethel-Smith. She's a forensic interviewer, victim witness advocate, CSCC coordinator with the Berkshire District Attorney's Office. Nikita works closely with April Zaragoza, who is a CSCC mental health clinician with Berkshire County Kids Place. From Suffolk County, we have Mary Beth Dawson. She's an outreach training manager at the Children's Advocacy Center in Suffolk County. Mary Beth also works closely with Jackie Lamont, who is the Director of Youth Safety and Outreach at the Suffolk District Attorney's Office. So tonight we're going to start hearing from Jackie and Mary Beth. You guys take over.
Oh, Jackie, I think you're muted.
Here we go. I'm unmuted. Perfect way to start, unmuting myself. It's great to be here. I'm sorry that I'm not seeing everybody in person in a packed hall, but it's great to see you all virtually on Zoom. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to be here tonight. And Anastina, thank you and MassSupport for holding this really critical workshop that we really could give every day in our communities right now, based on how important it is. So before we dive into it, we'd like to tell you just a little bit about who we are. So my name is Jackie. I work for the Suffolk County DA's office, which is Boston, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop. That's our jurisdiction. And this screenshot here is a website that shows a picture of my boss, and that's Rachel Rollins. And she knows we're doing this tonight. She's really happy about this collaboration between us and the Berkshire DA's office and MassSupport. And she cares greatly about the youth in our community. And so she supports this prevention work and outreach that we're going to present to you tonight. So my job at the DA's office is also to interview children just like Nikita, and we're going to actually show you a picture of those rooms here. There we go. And this is at our Children's Advocacy Center where Mary Beth works. So I'll let her introduce herself to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth. As Anastina and Jackie mentioned, I work at the Children's Advocacy Center, or the CAC of Suffolk County. We are a nonprofit agency that provides support and services to children and families who've experienced abuse or exploitation. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, but our presentation was informed in part by the real lived experiences of youth who have come to our center and talked to forensic interviewers like Jackie, like Nikita, who have talked about some of the bad things that they've experienced online. And that really informs our work because we're ultimately trying to prevent that from happening in the first place.
And I'd like to turn it over to our colleagues from Berkshire so that they can introduce themselves to you as well.
Hi, my name is April Zaragoza. I am the CSEC clinician at Berkshire County Kids Place. We are the Child Advocacy Center for Berkshire County. At Kids Place, we offer therapeutic services for youth who have been affected by trauma, so who have been physically or sexually abused, neglected, or have witnessed domestic violence. We also provide psychoeducational groups. A big piece of my role is I do outreach in the community with Nikita. We educate Berkshire County on what commercial sexual exploitation of children is. And I also do CSEC prevention groups with youth at Kids Place as well as in schools.
So my name is Nikita Bethel-Smith, victim witness advocate, CSEC coordinator, as well as a trained forensic interviewer for the Berkshire County District Attorney's Office. And there on the screen is our lovely district attorney in the Berkshires, which is Andrea Harrington, which I'm happy to represent the office tonight. I also I help and work in the child abuse unit for the district attorney's office. And as a CSEC coordinator, my role is to make sure that there is a multidisciplinary team approach to any of the cases that are screened in with children that are at high risk for being exploited. As a victim witness advocate for the district attorney's office, I work with victims who are connected to a criminal case, and I assist them in court proceedings, making sure that they're aware and exercising their victim bill of rights. And so I look forward to tonight to explain to you further what CSEC is and the impact and how to make sure that we keep children safe. And as a forensic interviewer, my role is to help talk to children who have been some sort of allegation of abuse and or sexual assault. So thank you so much.
And as you hear about our different jurisdictions, just know that if you don't live in one of those jurisdictions, that's okay. And this applies to people everywhere. You know, every jurisdiction and every office is a little bit different, but you'll see the similarities and you'll know that the way we approach things is very similar and that we care about young people in all communities, of course. And so we want to help anyone, anywhere learn about this topic. And if you have individual questions that come up about things specific to your county, we can refer you to the correct people. So I just wanted to say that. And now let's dive into the topic that we have here. So you're going to hear about Stop Block Talk from Suffolk County. That's the name of our program. And before we get into Stop Block Talk, we want to lay the foundation for this topic. And you heard Anastina talk about the increase in crimes against children since COVID has started. Why do you think that is? It's probably not extremely difficult to figure out, right? That kids are online now more than ever. So this survey was done back in 2018, and I'd ask you to just think about right now if you think the numbers are higher or lower or the same as they were in 2018. So in 2018, a survey of young people found that 95% of them have access to a smartphone. That means that even if they don't have one, their friend has one, their mom has one, their family member has one, they can probably get online. And that was in 2018. And I think most young people are being issued devices now through schools if they didn't have one. So I think that number is probably higher. And 45% of children said they were online almost constantly. Again, that might be higher now. It might be 70, 80, 90% of teens who would at least feel maybe like they're online all day in school and then probably still connected to their devices after school. And then this last number is important because it reminds us that when we're talking about technology and social media and connections, that we're also talking about gaming, video games, game consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, and to remember that those are most often connected to the internet. And this survey found that 92% of young people who identified as male had access or played a video game a lot of the time, and 75% of young people who identified as female did that. We asked sixth graders this week if they agreed with these numbers. And when we got to the video game numbers, they said, oh, it's 100%. 100% of us are on video games all the time. So that's straight from the sixth graders in our community. Mary Beth, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Yeah, we just want to preface this conversation by acknowledging that there are positives and negatives to using social media and gaming. You know, while youth, of course, can feel, they can experience cyberbullying, they might feel helpless, judged, alone, that sometimes the positives can outweigh those negatives, and that they might feel more connected with their peers, you know, feel like they can really explore their creative interests. That same group of sixth graders that we were talking to the other day, I remember one student saying that, you know, during COVID, that they've been able to keep in touch with all their friends and their cousins in ways they couldn't have if they were isolated at home. So there are ways to use these things safely. And so we don't want you to leave here feeling like, you know, you just need to ban the internet from kids.
Definitely important to recognize the positives. The talk tonight is not so much about the positives. That's what we have to remember. Tonight's about the risks and the negatives, but there's a lot of positives that go along with social media. So let's dive into some of the games, some of the apps, some of the most popular ones that we see. And we'd ask you to take a look at this slide and think about it either in your own life, in the life of the young people, in the lives of the young people you know, and tell us if you recognize a lot of these slides or a lot of these logos. Do these look familiar to you? If you are a parent or guardian of a young person over the age of 7, you probably know YouTube. If it's over 9 or 10, you probably know TikTok. I mean, these are just some of the most popular game apps. And then you might see Fortnite and Roblox and think, yep, I know those. So we're gonna suggest that you don't have to know every single app or game. Some of these are riskier than others. There's a few apps up here that are anonymous. So for example, the W in the bottom left corner is an app called Whisper, where people post anonymous things to each other. Those are a little bit riskier than, say, some of the other sites. But all of these can be used in a way that lowers the risk that something will go wrong. And that's the approach we're going to teach you tonight and ask for you to teach the young people in your lives, is the stop, block, talk approach that can be applied to any of these apps or games. And we're going to go over a few of these in a minute in more detail. So if, though, you are interested in diving into the real nitty-gritty of a certain app or site, we highly recommend this website called National Online Safety. And they've really done a good job of keeping up with the trends and with the popular apps. They even have one right now on Zoom. They're just really great. So if you have a child in your life that uses one more than others that we think would be great for you to learn about, we suggest you go to this site and download it's free, but download the guide that best suits your family's needs. These are great. But let's think about this phrase I've said a couple times. Stop, block, talk. We want to teach you kind of what each one means, our approach to this phrase, and what we really strongly emphasize to young people about it. Mary Beth, you want to describe our message?
Yeah, so when we're saying stop, we're essentially asking youth to stop before they post any private information online. So we'll go through some of our privacy settings and location settings with you in a couple slides. We want them to stop and pause and consider the consequences of sharing explicit images, of sexting, but also when thinking about cyberbullying, to stop and just not engage in any mean comments, to not be the person to post mean content. Blocking, we want to teach youth how to locate blocking and reporting features on these different platforms, and really encourage them just to block anyone that makes them feel uncomfortable, is pressuring them in any way, or just bothers them. And talking to a trusted adult, whether it's you or whether it's someone else in their life that they feel comfortable talking to, if something bad does happen online.
And depending on how old you are in this crowd, or maybe they still teach it in school, is stop, drop, and roll. It's kind of a quick phrase that maybe we all learned what to do in an emergency. And we really want kids to kind of remember this stop, block, and talk. And it's why we even have a little song about it that we'll show you at the end, is we're really hoping that it gets ingrained in them for when they're using sites and anything should come up.
Yeah, so the first thing let's go through is just privacy settings. So one of the easiest way youth can be safer online is by making their profiles set to private, which means that not any stranger could add them on there. These are just some examples of a TikTok profile, Facebook, Instagram. You'll see we've blocked out in boxes some of the information on here to protect people's identity, but you can just see examples where people are posting where they go to school, maybe where they work if they have a job, if they're a teenager, and we're asking youth to refrain from posting that kind of private information. In this example on the right, you'll see two examples of an Instagram profile. The one all the way to the right is set to private, which is great. You know, they're taking good steps to be safer, but you can also see where the red arrow is pointing that they have over 1,200 followers. You know, and just think about the children in your life and think, how likely is it that they know in person, in real life, over 1,200 people really well? So it's likely that this person has accepted followers or friends on this platform that they don't really know well. And so again, we understand that youth have this desire to get lots of likes, to get lots of followers and friends, but really to ask them to vet who they're accepting. And if they do choose to have some of their content, whether their account is set to public, or if they are accepting quite a few people, just to be really careful about what they're sharing, whether it be in images, videos, the things they're saying. You can also see a common trend that we've been seeing is that because kids want so many followers and friends, they're posting their usernames to other apps across platforms. So again, in this example on the right, you'll see from their Instagram page, underneath their profile picture, they say SC for Snapchat. So here's my Snapchat username, add me. Here's my VSCO album. So the VSCO link there. VSCO is an online photo album that cannot be set to private. So again, you can imagine if someone finds them on here, they can click that link and still they're finding all of this public information about them.
Yeah, so I'll just stress that it's important to remember that even if someone's profile is set to private, whatever they put as information on their basic profile is not. So everybody that uses Instagram has access to these young people's Snapchats, their VSCO albums. That's just really important to understand.
And the other crucial piece of privacy settings is location services. If you've recognized this image from Snapchat, this is the Snap Map, which essentially maps out where different users are located. So if you have your location services on, someone can scroll in on the map and specifically find where your icon, your user is located. And it's so specific they could scroll in and even see the building that you're in. It's really specific. In that example on the right, you can see where people are traveling on a road if they're in the car. And of course, this brings about a lot of safety concerns for children, especially if they have friends on here that they don't know well or might have bad intentions. So what you can do to address that is both within the app. In this example, you can go on Snapchat into what's called ghost mode. And when you toggle ghost mode on, it means that people can't see where you are. You could encourage the youth to maybe accept only a few friends, or maybe you as a parent might want to see where they're located for safety reasons. But really, we're asking youth to just keep that limited to maybe a parent or maybe a best friend. An easier way of turning off location services, rather than go into each specific app, is just going to the device's privacy settings in general. These screenshots are just from Apple devices. So whether it's an iPhone, a tablet, you can go into the settings on your phone, click on privacy, and at the top you'll see location services. And when you click on location services, it'll bring up all of the apps on that device that have the capability of using location. You can set that to never while you're using the app or always. And we're really recommending that you just turn it off to never if it has anything to do with social media or gaming. Of course, there are certain apps like Waze if you're using it for GPS, or a coffee shop if you want to find the nearest location, where you could set that to be while using. But in general, there's really no reason it should be turned on. Another thing I want to just stress here is camera and photos. That should really be set to never as well. Otherwise, when someone takes a photo on their device, it can embed the GPS coordinates into the file itself. So if you've ever seen an example on a social media app like Facebook or Instagram in the past, when people have uploaded photos, it might automatically show where the album was taken. It might capture where you took a vacation, for example. And we really just don't want that to be an option if you upload those photos, often unknowingly sharing their location.
Thank you, Mary Beth. So let's go into some of the really popular apps, just because these are the ones we do see the most, that kids use the most, and unfortunately that there's some problems with or risks associated with these. So we just want to go through a few of them.
Yeah, so YouTube, YouTube, I just wanted to answer the question that came up. We will definitely get to that in a minute. So for Snapchat, for those of you who aren't as familiar with it, the basic premise is that you can share a photo or a video. And what made it so popular, beyond the filters and the fun things you can use, is that it's operating under the premise that the content you share will disappear after a short number of seconds. And so we've seen that kids tend to be a bit riskier with what they're sharing on here, because they're, assuming that the people they share these content with will, the content is just going to disappear. But we really want to encourage youth to think about, once you share something, just think of it being out there. We've seen a lot of sexting and sharing of explicit images on Snapchat, just because, again, they think that, oh, well, no one's going to see it, it's going to disappear. Snapchat does have a notification if someone screenshots or takes a picture of what you've shared, but there are lots of ways that people have found around that, whether they take, another phone nearby and take a photo of the screen. There's lots of ways people have gotten creative to get around that feature. So we really want kids to understand, to refrain from sharing explicit content and operate under the assumption that it could be out there for a while. Beyond sharing your own content, they also have what's called the Discover page, where you can browse different videos or, different things about celebrities and games. And if you can imagine, maybe an adolescent who's curious, they might be searching as well for content, based on their interests. They might find different usernames that pop up. In this next image here, you can see the child has searched for the word sex, which will bring up search results that include usernames with that word in the username, or different stories related to it. And so again, we just want to stress, with Snapchat, along with several different social media apps, a common trend we've seen is that kids are often exposed to more explicit or pornographic content at younger and younger ages as they're accessing these platforms. And so they might not be ready for what they see. They might not have had a conversation with you or another trusted adult before about what healthy sex and sexuality look like, what healthy relationships and boundary setting and consent looks like. And so just be aware that they could be finding information that, or finding content that might be a little advanced for their age, and they might want to talk to you or have someone in their life that they can talk to if something bothers them on there. The second most popular app we're going to go through, or one, is just YouTube. So YouTube can be really, really great for searching for things like how to write a resume or how to fix the stove, or, you know, lots of how-to videos, entertainment. But again, you know, we find that even if a child searches for something like truth or dare, they can scroll down the search results and start finding things like dirty truth or dare. And again, the content is just getting explicit. Again, young kids at younger and younger ages are seeing this. Another thing I wanted to highlight is for kids with YouTube channels themselves. There are safe ways to do that, especially if you make your profile private or if you're only sharing the video with certain people. We do see a lot of bullying and negative comments on YouTube videos. So one way that could help that, or just to help the child be safer, is you can disable the commenting function on YouTube like you can with other apps. And also just encourage, if a child does have their own YouTube channel and they're sharing videos, just to be, again, really careful and have conversations with them about the types of information they're sharing, making sure they're not sharing, for example, like their name, where they live, different usernames that they can be added on.
Yeah, that was a good question about, you know, is it safe for a 9-year-old to have a YouTube channel? And the answer is it can be, but with each kind of step they take toward more sharing and less privacy, it just gets a little bit riskier. So they could have a YouTube channel where they only have family following them, or they could have a YouTube channel that they have friends and family, and each time it gets a little bit riskier. And they could have a YouTube channel that has comments on or has comments off. And if they have comments on and they're sharing with, you know, a greater number of people, we have to prepare them to know what to do if they do get a rude comment. And we'd want them to stop, not respond, not engage with the person who made the rude comment, and to block that person. So it's a conversation that, again, we want to empower them to use these apps safely, but they have to be really careful. And the younger they are, the more careful I think you need to be about the privacy settings and just how much they are sharing. And we also know that young people that have YouTube channels want tons of followers and want tons of comments, but it just increases the risk with each step that they take.
Yeah, and so Instagram, another one of the most popular apps. If you haven't used it, again, you can also share photos and videos on here. But so there are certain flags that platforms like Instagram put up so that you can't put a certain hashtag that might be more explicit associated with the content. So for example, the platform itself will automatically put a red flag and report content where you can't have hashtag porn. But people have gotten really creative and found ways around this by misspelling words like sex or misspelling porn. In this example in the middle, we just add the letters IC. And when you search that, we found over 120,000 posts with pornographic content. So again, just be aware that, you know, you need to have these conversations early, because they could find this content and either stumble upon it. They might not have been ready to see it, or they could be actively searching for it out of curiosity at their age. But you really want to make sure that you're having conversations about that at an early age.
We can't rely just on the filters of the apps and the sites. As Mary Beth said, there's ways around it. And for example, on Roblox, a young person recently gave us the example that he was on there and another gamer that he was playing with started swearing at him. And he said, you know, swears are supposed to be not allowed, but they were just spelling the swear words a little bit different. And that's how people get around it. So we can't just say, well, we've got it set on safe and there's moderators and there's filters, we still have to have those conversations with kids about what to do if something slips by and they do see something that makes them uncomfortable or scared.
And this is just an example. Instagram, like many platforms now, have a live feature. So, you can go live on Facebook, like some of you are watching now. You can go live on Instagram. And again, it's kind of a way of broadcasting to your audience, which can be really fun for kids, feeling like you have your own little TV show, you're going live. But in this example, we found a youth who had a public profile so we could see who they were. They had over 1,600 people watching at the time. And you can see just in the short time it took us to take a screenshot of the live video, the kinds of comments, the negative, explicit comments that they were getting, often sexual in nature. And so again, just be aware, especially if they have public profiles or they're accepting even people, friends that they don't know very well, they could still get these really negative comments as well. So they need a place like you where they can go and talk to someone if that does bother them. And TikTok. So this is the last one we'll go through. TikTok, it's newer, it's super, super popular. They've had hundreds of millions of downloads in the last couple of years. If you don't know how it works, the premise is that a short video plays. We'll show a quick example here.
Oops, sorry, let me see if I can click this.
That's okay.
Sorry, videos give me a little trouble.
No worries. Well, if it doesn't play, essentially the promise is that, a short video clip just plays over and over in a loop. And, there's lots of funny videos on here, lots of creative videos. One of the most popular things is viral TikTok dances. And so a child might see a dance that's really fun and they do it in that little clip, and then lots of other youth try to replicate it over and over. So these are two youth who are kind of trying to replicate the same dance. But again, they bring about some of the same concerns here. They have the option to have likes. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so you can just see they're doing the dance over and over. And then this person on the right is trying to copy it and do the same dance over and over. So it can be really fun. We want to acknowledge that, there are definitely positive avenues to explore your creative interests on here. You can get really fun, positive comments here, like, go get it, girl power, you nailed it. But, again, in the mix of all of that, they're getting some negative comments as well. So I think the next slide has just a couple examples here of youth who, there's some here who are dancing, one in the middle is playing guitar. There are some great comments on here, like, you look amazing, keep doing you, this is amazing. The youth on the right actually has an intellectual disability, and you can see some of the comments on there of, his hype is a joke. There's some emojis that kind of indicate maybe this person's bullying them. And again, platforms like this, you have the option to disable comments, but I think kids are so driven and so desiring of positive validation and affirmation, especially as they're developing their identities at this young age. And so they might want those positive comments just to get that kind of validation, but know that they might then hyper focus on those more bullying comments. And so just be aware that you could really not know what the youth is struggling with it until you have these open conversations with it, but they might be experiencing this online as well. This is just a quick example of how easy it is to find youth across different platforms. It's kind of can be surprising. We found someone with a public profile on the left on TikTok. This particular youth then said in their profile, add me on YouTube or add me on Snapchat. And so we immediately found their profile on Instagram, and then we found their profile on Say At Me, which is it's a service that's anonymous. And so people can enter comments completely anonymously. So you can just imagine the kinds of things people might be saying to youth on there. And, we found that it's helpful if you're trying to teach kids to keep their profiles set to private and be careful about their friends and followers that they're accepting. One motivation or incentive for them to be more private is by letting them know, hey, if you have a problem where someone's harassing you on TikTok, wouldn't it be better if all your TikTok, fans don't then have your Snapchat username and your Instagram profile as well. So just helping them understand that they've worked hard to curate their content, they're having fun with what they're sharing. And so it might be a motivation for them to just be safer sharing their less information, because they don't want to then have to start all over and create completely new profiles.
Thanks, Mary Beth. And as we talk about kind of this cross platforms and how easy it is to just add and find kids, we want to take a moment to think about the language that we use when we talk to kids about being safe online. And I think it's tempting to say, don't talk to strangers or don't talk to people you don't know. And while that is good advice, right? We don't want our young people just randomly talking maybe to people they don't know, or if they are doing that, because so many young people are doing that now, to not be sharing personal information. But if you're talking to your child and you said to them, hey, I don't want you playing Roblox with anyone you don't know, and they said to you, well, I only play with my friends, you might think, great, okay, my child's only playing Roblox with the friends that he or she knows from school or knows from the park or knows in real life. But the problem is kids use the term friend in a much different way than we ever did. And when a kid says a friend, they might be talking about someone that they just met yesterday, who they game with, who they've added as a friend. They also might be referring to other gamers or followers of their friends. And they might say, well, they're friends with Tom, they're friends with Jennifer. But friend doesn't mean the same thing to us anymore. So we have to make sure that kids know the difference between real life people that they know from school, from their lives, and the people they meet online. And that unless there's a lot of work and a lot of carefulness put into to a friend online, where you and your guardian are talking on the phone and seeing the person, there's just no way to know for sure who friends are when you've only met them online. So we just want to be very careful not to say, okay, only play with your friends, because they're thinking about friends probably in a different way than we are. So I'm going to go really quickly through the next couple slides, just so that we make sure to get through as much as possible. I want to, again, just point out the positive aspects of gaming and remind everyone that gaming brings so much joy and connection to young people. While we won't go into kind of some of the downfalls of gaming, as far as violence and things like that, gaming really does fill kind of a need for a lot of kids, and we want to remember that. And a lot of kids report stronger, better relationships with their friends through gaming. But in gaming, it's the same idea, where they're using the term friend to define who they play with. And it might be someone that they literally met an hour ago and now they're friends. And so just like social media, we want young people to be empowered to not add people that they don't know, or if they do, to not share personal information with the people that they don't know in real life. And a lot of young people game with people they don't know. And we want to make sure that if they are doing that, they're just not being pressured, they're not being coerced into sharing things. And especially as April and Nikita talk about exploitation, that they're being very careful about these relationships maybe that they think they have and what that could actually lead to. So really important to remember that. As far as gaming, these are more examples of kind of the way it's set up when they do log on, that it's friends. And there's even levels of friends. But games that are geared toward very young kids call players friends, and then you have a 6 or 7-year-old playing with maybe a 45-year-old and they're friends. So it's risky. And even if there's not chat within the game, a lot of young people and adults are using this app, which is Discord, to communicate. So there are different chat rooms or chat streams where you can talk about certain games. And some of the games are things like Roblox, Pokemon Go, things that we think about young people playing, but there's high numbers of adults that are playing them. Some adults are safe. We don't know this, right? We can't tell who the safe adults and who's a safe adult and who's not online. Kids need to understand that, but there are some adults who are there for the wrong reasons and who would be trying to possibly have some sort of friendship or relationship with a young person who would eventually cause harm to that person. So we have to be very careful about these apps that encourage the talk with people you don't know because you have something in common. It's so tempting, you can imagine, to talk to people that also play the game. But again, we don't want children to be DMing, direct messaging people they don't know. A lot of these are going on in the middle of the night. And a lot of them also lead to sexual adult content really quickly. We want to remember webcams, that we want to teach children that if they, and adults actually, if they have their webcams on, that someone could be recording at any time, and that things can sometimes get adult. So if they're playing with either older people or people they don't know, for example, on the right, seems like a mild game of Uno, right? What can go wrong with Uno? Well, someone on this game starts daring others to take their clothes off, and then someone does start taking their clothes off. Someone records it and someone posts it on YouTube. So we want to talk to kids about how quickly that can happen and why it's not a good idea to engage in that, and to stop, block, and talk about it, to leave the game if something like that happens. I'm going to skip through some of this and really quickly cover what the law says about sexting and about naked images in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. So Mary Beth, can you do a quick study of, or overview of this study?
Yes. So this study was from 2018. It was a meta-analysis, which means that they looked at a bunch of different studies. So 39 different studies with a total of over 110,000 youth. And when they looked at all of those studies, they found that the average prevalence or rate of sending sexts was about 15%, and receiving sexts was about 27%. Of course, there are certain differences like gender norms or gender differences among those, but we also want to highlight that it's also can be common for youth to forward a sext without consent. So they might receive a sext of a peer and then think it's funny or want to share among their friends without that youth's consent. That was about 12%. And then 8% were also getting a sext forwarded to them without consent. So imagine a teenager who's receiving a pic that they just did not need to see, did not want to see, but was sent it without their consent. And so again, this study is a couple years old, and we've heard anecdotal evidence, at least, that rates of sexting, not only among young people, but among people of all ages, has gone up during COVID-19, just because people are isolated, separated from people they love or are interested in, and so they're turning to this as another form of intimacy.
As we get into talking with young people about, you know, healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, it can feel sometimes awkward, it can feel overwhelming, and we think this is a really good resource for parents and guardians that can not only help guide conversations about sexting, but just about sex education in general. So this is one of the resources we would share with you to maybe take a look at and see if you like kind of the approach that they offer. And we do want you to know that there is a law in Massachusetts. So there is a law that says you must be 18 years old to take a photo of any kind of private part of a body. So the age of consent in Massachusetts is 16. So that means you can engage in sexual activity at the age of 16, but you cannot document or record that activity until you turn 18. So that's kind of one way to think about it. Now, does the law mean that teenagers are not sexting and sharing images? Of course not. The issues that come along with the law, we're going to talk about a little bit. But in Massachusetts and in many states, there's not a lot of options. And there's child pornography, human trafficking. These are the statutes that cover some of these laws. And we don't want to focus on the fact that you know, someone could be arrested or charged with creating child pornography, because when we do that, we tend to shut children down. I would say stress the law more when you're talking about sharing, how it's wrong, but we don't want to tell children, especially the younger children, that they're going to be charged as a sex offender and have to register as a sex offender for the rest of their life. What that does is it scares children into, when they do have a problem, not wanting to talk about it and being worried, whether it's for themselves or for someone they know, that the person's going to get arrested, their friend is going to get arrested and charged as a sex offender. So we really, really steer away from focusing on the law. But it's good for them to know that there's a law, but we don't want to focus on that so much. So we want to acknowledge that sexting happens and talk about the consequences. What are all the things that could go wrong with sexting? Because we even have 18-year-olds and up in our lives, right? And we're not going to recommend that at 18 years old, they just start taking as many nude photos as they want and sharing them all over the place. No, there's so many risks that can go along with taking naked images. There's mistakes that happen. I don't know if you've ever emailed or texted the wrong person, but that's a good example to give to young people, because they've probably done it and feel terrible when they do it. So we want to talk about the things that can go wrong. We want to talk about pressure and remind them that anyone that's pressuring them to do something is not someone that they should trust, and maybe not someone that has their feelings, that cares about their feelings. And we want to thank them for telling us about it. We don't want to say to them, you know, why didn't you tell me before? We don't want to be shocked. We don't want to shame them. We recommend not taking away their device forever. Again, just like telling a child they're going to be arrested, it's going to shut them down from sharing. And we're not saying no consequences. Maybe a device needs to be taken away for a shorter period of time. But when kids think they're going to lose their device for a year, they're not going to talk about problems. We need to give them a safe space where they can talk about issues. So 2 more slides before I turn it over to Nikita and April. And I just want to set the stage for them. As we've talked about naked images, we want to remind you how easy it is for young people not only to share images, but to even sell images. And so there is something that is referred to as Snapchat Premium. It is not officially a part of Snapchat, but it's kind of a code that people of all ages actually use to tell others that they will sell their naked images for them. So if you see something on Instagram, say you see something on Instagram that says, my Snapchat Premium is, then you know that person is using Snapchat as a way to sell naked photos. So they only allow followers who pay them separately. And these days it's easy to have ways to get paid, which I think my colleagues will talk about. So we just want to remember this. We want to remember that a lot of sites make it super, super easy to sell sexual activity, you know, by video, by photo. There's a lot of sites set up like this that all you have to do is click a button to say you're 18. There's no actual check to know if you're 18. So exploitation can happen very easily. And when you think about some of maybe kids of all ages, probably are tempted by the thought of money, right? And especially maybe some children who are a little bit more challenged in finances than other, it's very easy to see why they might turn to this kind of activity. It's almost understandable, and it's sad. And we just want to be aware that it happens, and that we can talk them through it if we do discover it. So since COVID, this has all risen, just like Mary Beth and I have talked about previously. It happens in gaming, it happens on social media. The last thing I'll say is to remember, as we talk about why kids don't tell, to remember, let's say you're a 10-year-old playing a game. And first of all, you're not supposed to be playing with people you don't know, but you've let a few friends of friends on, so you're playing with someone you don't know, and that person gives you something within the game. They give you a benefit, they give you a gold coin, they give you a way to buy things within the game. But then a couple days later, that person asks you, who are you home with? who's in your house? And you know, you as a 10-year-old don't know what to say. Maybe you do tell them. And then maybe they ask you to do something. Go in the bathroom, take a picture, and now you don't know what to do. Well, now the dilemma is, do I tell my guardian, who's going to be so mad at me for talking to this person in the first place and playing this game with someone I don't know? They're going to take away my game forever, and I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, all of those things. Or do I go along with what this person is telling me to do? So it's just an example of why it's so important to tell a child they have a safe space to talk to you if something does happen online.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Nikita Bethel-Smith, CSEC coordinator for those who might just be tuning in. And so I just want to take a moment to define what CSEC is, because I know some people are like, what is CSEC? What does this even mean? And how does this connect to some of the online exploitation that we're going to talk about? And April will then kind of go over some grooming methods and signs to recognize and some warning things for parents to take away today. So CSEC is commercially sexual exploitation of children. It's an exchange or an offer to exchange sexual acts for something of value to that child, whether money, goods, or services. This includes the exchange of sexual materials like photos or videos, pornography, a form of child sexual abuse, assault on a child's vulnerabilities. And I'm just going to go to Safe Harbor's explanation on the next two slides before I get into myths. If we can go to the next slide.
Sure.
Thank you. So Safe Harbor provisions in the Mass Human Trafficking Law 2012 defines sexually exploited child any person under the age of 18 who engages or agrees to engage or offer to engage sexual conduct with another person in return for a fee or in exchange for food, shelter, clothing, education, or care. So, and again, just to reiterate that CSEC is child abuse. I think that people need to know that today that are tuning in, is it's something that can be screened in through 51A, which is through the Department of Children and Families for the state of Massachusetts. So that means that that can take on a coordinated response, which I will then cover a little later. It requires a mandated report file and any suspected abuse and neglect on behalf of that child as a victim. And if we can go to the next point. Thank you. This just kind of gives a little more definition in depth. I don't have to cover everything on this particular slide, but these are just things that a CRA is a definition expanded to include sexually exploited child. It just is amends that child requiring assistance. It's a way that DCF is able to help that child further as well if the parent is not able to access certain resources and maybe they need some in-court support as well. And so also to divert child victims from criminalization. One of the myths and what you'll hear sometimes in stereotypes is that they must be a juvenile delinquent, or, you know, they must be a runaway, or they must be a child prostitute. And, you know, language is key when we're talking about CSEC, and even in this online world today, is that you have to make sure that you're using and framing the right language, because that's all the difference of how we help service children. So rather, if we utilize that this child is a victim of human trafficking, or that this child, you know, is unsafe, or this child is dealing with some form of coercion, or has been manipulated, or has been exploited. So the way that we utilize language in this world is going to make a difference in how that child is serviced. And it's not that, and if we go to the next slide, Jackie, thank you. This picture is really important because this shows a normal, healthy teenager. This could be anybody's child that's tuning in today. And this is like one of my favorite things to utilize, because any child is at risk for being exploited. And I want everybody to really grab a hold of that. It's not the family that is just impoverished, dealing with poverty or low income. It's not the child that is dealing with some behavior issues that falls on the spectrum spectrum, and maybe they're getting constant calls from the school adjustment counselor and they're falling behind. It could be the child that is totally playing the best sports and has been the best student. They too are at risk for being exploited. Also in the LGBTQ community, they're at risk for being exploited. And it's not just a girl or a teenage girl issue as well. Boys also are exploited every day. And so we wanted to be clear about that. And the key thing too is that children need to know that they are a victim of sexual abuse. And so not that they've done something wrong. It's important for them to recognize that they are a victim and that this issue is not an outside of the United States of American issue. It is happening right in Berkshire County. I'm pretty sure that Jackie and Mary Beth can talk about what's happening on their side of their jurisdiction as well. It is happening right in our neighborhoods. And so this is why I do what I do. Every day I see it, whether it's through Snapchat, whether it's through Omegle, which is a new up on the rise that we see that is screened in as well. This is not just a gang issue or that this youth is hanging out or that this youth is drug addicted as well. It is impacting our youth now more than ever. And now with kids having to do school with virtual and being home, they get curious. And that perpetrator that is on the other side of that screen, they're going to gain that person's trust because they're not going to know at first that that person could be over age, and that exploitation can also be a partner that they're dating with. There's a number of ways that exploitation can show up in a youth's life. And so I'm going to turn it over to April, who's going to talk a little bit more about grooming to help families understand tonight.
Hi, sorry about that. So like Nikita was saying, it's important to know that all youth are at risk of being exploited. But there are some things that make some youth more vulnerable to exploitation than others. So we know that most youth who've been exploited have a history of sexual or physical abuse or a history of neglect. That also means that they have a history of being in the system in some way. So either through DCF or the juvenile court system. One high risk for being exploited is if a youth is running away, sneaking out at night, or they're missing for a period of time. So when a youth runs away, they are not connected with resources that they potentially need, like housing, food, shelter. So it increases the risk that they meet someone who is going to offer those things, but in order to have a safe place to stay or have some food, that person is going to ask them to exchange sexual favors for that. Another vulnerability is any type of dysfunction in the home. So that might be domestic violence, a parent who's struggling with substance abuse, a household just where the youth might not feel connected or feel cared for. So again, the youth might go out in the community to get those things, to get love, attention, safety, and they might run into an exploiter. That's also true for the LGBTQ community. So if they are from a homophobic household, again, they might go to the community to get that connection, that support, and that acceptance that they're looking for, and they could run into an exploiter. Youth who, transgendered youth who are going through the transitioning process and potentially want to start hormone treatment, they might not have the means to pay for those things. So they might encounter someone who says, oh, I know an easy way for you to make that money. And they would be asked to do sexual favors or send sexual content online. Some other vulnerabilities, youth who have no peer supports or very little friends or are constantly bullied. Also, if we think of in this COVID time, a lot of the social interactions that we have are online. So youth are meeting, kind of like what Jackie said, friends through social media or gaming sites. And those are the people that they are leaning on, who are validating their feelings, giving them the support that they need. And unfortunately, they're running into exploiters who are the ones that are giving them that attention. And so the reason why we talk about the vulnerabilities is because what happens is an exploiter also looks at all these different vulnerabilities that a youth has and uses those vulnerabilities to gain the youth's trust and potentially manipulate the youth. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we call this the grooming process. So online grooming is a process in which an exploiter uses seemingly casual or innocent information with the goal of establishing a relationship to gain a youth's trust. And so we like to put real life content, into the things that we talk about. So I just want to share something that we have seen recently. So a few months ago, we did a forensic interview with a 15-year-old girl. She lived a few states away. She one day was live streaming. She was talking about how her dad had passed away. Her mom and the people she lived with didn't understand what she was going through. She was very lonely. She felt like she was always in trouble. She was getting blamed for all the bad things that were happening in her home, and she had no one to turn to. And so what happened was an older woman contacted this youth through the chat on the live streaming website she was on and said, "Hey, that all seems really hard. That must be really difficult for you to be going through." And so the woman kept talking to the youth and introduced the youth to her husband, and her husband also started talking to the youth. And he was saying, "Oh, I've gone through the same thing when I was your age. It was really, really hard. You know what? It looks like your family isn't taking care of you. They don't know, they don't understand you. They're not helping you. Why don't you come live with me? And you can come live with me and there won't be any rules. You can do whatever you want. You'll have your own room. Everything will be nice." And the youth agreed, and the male went down a couple states away, picked her up, and brought her all the way to Massachusetts. Luckily, the youth's mom filed a missing persons report right away, and the police were able to locate her, and they were able to bring her home. But that's just a perfect example of the grooming process. So an exploiter is going to pick up little details about the youth online, and they're going to affirm any feelings or life choices the youth have. They might say, "Hey, you like roadblocks, I like roadblocks," or just pick up any interest that the youth has, and they're going to invest time in this youth and talk to this youth and really get the youth to trust them. And then so once that trust is gained, it turns into either a friendship or a romantic relationship. So potentially it might turn into, well, this person's my boyfriend or this person's my girlfriend. They love me, they care for me. And it also could potentially, the exploiter could send the youth money or gifts. And so then the idea is, well, they're sending me things. They clearly care about me. They love me. They want to take care of me. And then so slowly the exploiter is going to introduce some type of sexual content. So they might expose them to pornography slowly. They might notice the youth's general curiosity about sex. And so they might start asking about questions about sex or answering questions about sex. They might start sexting. And then so as this relationship progresses, the youth might start sending nude photos, sexual content. And if there's a point when the youth wants to get out of the relationship, that's when the exploiter is going to start using threatening tactics, which is, you can't stop talking to me, or you need to meet up with me, or you can't stop sending me photos, because if you do, I'm going to send all the naked photos you already sent me to all the people at your school, or I'm going to tell your mom and dad this is what you've been doing, and you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So those are just some of the few ways that exploiters groom youth, not only online, but this could also be an in-person interaction as well. And it's also important to know that As a society, we view exploiters as like the grungy old man in the basement, but that's not always the case. Exploiters can be women. In my story, it was the wife and the husband who groomed this youth to bring to Massachusetts. It could be a youth of the same age who is exploiting another youth. It could be someone slightly older. So it's really important to remember those things. And I think, Nikita, this is when you were going to talk about red flags and stuff.
Yes. Yes, I'm ready. So some of the red flags, and thank you, April. And April and I work very closely together when it comes to these particular cases as well. And so there's visible signs of abuse. That could be marks on a child's body as well, change in appearance, hair and nails and tattoos. And so what we mean by that is all of a sudden they have money, they have a new hairstyle, maybe they have their nails done out of nowhere, they have expensive sneakers, things that they weren't buying beforehand. So those are huge things to look out for exploitation. In possession of expensive items, as I mentioned, hotel keys as well, multiple cell phones, or not wanting to be away from the phone. So in other words, they spend a majority of their time, accessing social media, whether it's all day or as soon as they're done with school, they're still on the computer or on their phone. Those are things to look out for. They could have already been dealing with someone or talking to someone over the last several months. And so for them, they may not even know that this person, again, is not age appropriate, but to them, that's their friend. And so like an incident I remember just from being a forensic interviewer and also CSEC coordinator is that a young, she was about 15 at the time, and she was being exploited, but did not know the person that she was talking to on the other side was well over the age of an adult. And so at the time they were talking for several months online, and so never anything outside of that, but they were even trying to meet her and set up time to meet with her as well. And they began to also send gifts to her home. And so these are the things that we're talking about when we mean that children are at risk for exploitation. And so when a parent finds these things out, they're so shocked and surprised that this was even occurring. And so we want to make sure that children are safe all across the board. And so there's unexplainable absences from school. And so school adjustment counselors also are key in communication because they're going to keep a relationship. They're going to check in with that youth and also the friends of that youth who may go to them. And so it's important to know, who are the people that are involved with your children, friends of them, who are friends that they're associated with, because also a friend of that particular youth could be trying to coerce them in and also trying to get them into being exploited. So they themselves can be exploited, and now they're trying to bring that friend along with them. And so it's important to know, who are my children being associated with, and who are they talking to, and do they have multiple screen names that they're using on some of these social media sites as well. And so there are time frames that you can set on online. You can set a time frame for how long you want them to utilize social media, and you can also ask and require for you to know, what are their screen names. That's something to think about. Hanging out with older peers. So if a youth is 14, they're hanging out with someone that's 17 and 18, or if they're in middle school in 8th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade, they're hanging out with high schoolers. So that's a huge red flag. Having an older boyfriend or girlfriend, because think about it, if that teenager, that adolescent is dating somebody and this is their first dating relationship, that boyfriend or girlfriend can also exploit them as well, because now you're building a trust. It's not always a scenario of a pimp or this street prostitution. In terms of CSEC, it can start off as someone is grooming them into being in a relationship, and then now they have their trust, and next thing you know, they're being exploited and they're being trafficked. And also, when you're trafficked, it doesn't require movement. You don't have to be going across state as well. That can be happening within their neighborhood or a couple of streets over, or within the same state. And so I want to be clear to mention that. Skipping school or classes are also some signs and red flags, and not willing to share information on their friends or their whereabouts. And so maybe they're just leaving the house all of a sudden, or there's new friends that you have no idea media that they're associating with, you know, and or the behavior and the mood starts changing. They start doing things differently, or grades start decreasing. These are all things and signs, as well as CSEC and a child is being exploited. Becoming more and more isolated from their regular friends. And so maybe it was a crew or someone or people or 3 or 4 good best friends that they were associated with, or people on the team that they were associated with. And now all of a sudden they're falling out. They're not hanging out with that same group of kids. And so those are huge signs that a child is being exploited. Unexplained changes, I've already mentioned that. Personality as well, chaotic, aggressive. Maybe they're starting to justify, whether it's a partner that you have a concern that they're being exploited by, they're justifying their behavior, and or they're trying to rationalize why they have to be online so much. And so if we can go to the next slide. And again, so spending increased amounts of time on the internet, I've mentioned that already. And so increased amount of times could be different depending on the youth. Some youth, for increased amount of time, they might only spend an hour, and next thing you know, they're spending 3 hours. Or, you know, next thing you know, they're up all sorts of times of the night utilizing the internet. And so becoming increasingly secretive. So now they're not communicating with you. You know, you want to make sure that you can have open conversations with your children. So that way, if something was to come up, they're going to come to you automatically. So if someone is asking them for something on the internet, you know, and they've been talking to this person for, let's say, a month, they've been talking to someone, and then all of a sudden this person starts increasing what they're asking for them to do. Now they're asking for them to send some sort of nude, and then maybe they send the nude because they're comfortable and this is their only friend, and they've made them feel like they can trust them and trust them enough to send this nude. And then it starts leveling up, and now the stakes become higher. And then they start asking them, well, send me a video. And then if that child, that adolescent, says, no, I'm not going to send you a video, then they begin to threaten and harm and say, well, I'll threaten your family, I'll harm your family, or I'll show everybody, as Jackie has mentioned earlier. But it's important for them to realize is that that one picture is no longer private once you share it, even on Snapchat, because I've seen a lot of screen-ins on Snapchat as well. Snapchat is a very popular way that youth tend to share things, but they think that it goes away, and that's not true. Someone can screenshot it, someone can save that video and download it, and so once it's there, you know, it's no longer private. And so then that person's threatening to share that information, and or they're asking you to send them money, you know, and if you don't send them money, they're going to tell everybody what you did or what you shared. And so those are levels of exploitation that can happen online. So not being able to talk openly about their online activity, so they're not sharing what they're doing online, shutting the door and hiding what they have on screen when someone enters the room. Again, this can be a adolescent that is highly socialized. It doesn't mean that this is a youth that falls on the spectrum, that doesn't have friends and it is not involved and is not doing well in school. They can totally do all the things above, and it can also come from a home where they're dealing with poverty and violence as well, you know, but everybody can be affected by this. And so also appearing scared and secretive, agitated when answering a cell phone, vaguely talking, but offering no further information, becomes obsessive about being online, receives phone calls from people you don't know, or makes calls to numbers that you do not recognize, receives gifts, mail, as I mentioned earlier, or packages from someone you don't know, and they withdraw from family or friends and spends more time. And also they begin to download other information that they weren't utilizing before. And so maybe you're seeing an increase of them wanting to maybe socialize in a way that they weren't socializing before, you know, and maybe they're dressing different, talking different. These are all things to watch out for in terms of issues with online. Online, I don't want people to walk away feeling scared or nervous, but we want to make sure, I think, from all of our presentation tonight, is that you have the information at hand. And so if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so video sharing platform, these are just some other things to mention. So it's a pay to view content, monthly membership fees. This is some things that happen in terms of other apps as well. And our presentation all together, they've done an excellent job with helping you understand what is out there now, but also the things to look out for in the E-Light Club. Young people easily are lured in by the prospect of supporting their favorite influencers. And so there's things that you see now, like on Facebook, people will ask for you to pay, and these are celebrities, and they have like these private rooms. And so this is becoming popular. And so think about how that's impacting an adolescent mind frame, that their favorite celebrity is having a fans only page. And so that's a level that exploitation can happen, and where perpetrators hide behind the scenes as well. And so 18 and up allow sexually explicit videos to be uploaded. And as Jackie already mentioned, anybody can click and say that they're 18 and up. Anybody can make up a date of birth. I mean, there's very low minimum requirements in terms of safety features. And so the content is even made by adults. It can be scraped and resold by other people, and teens try to cash in with sexually explicit content. And so some of the things too is that easy money. And also there's positive, I can't see the last part because it's talking, but that's just some of the other online pieces. And I think I'm at the next slide. Thank you, Jackie, so much for being our slide person. I know people are saying, well, what are these money transfer apps doing here on a presentation like tonight? Well, guess what? Exploitation happens through these apps as well. And so we have to be also careful to make sure that we are monitoring the usage of these apps. And so if there's a name that comes up that you don't recognize, take a look at that, do some research. Maybe it's a name that's on the social media account that your adolescent is using as well. Look at the amount that they're sending. Where is it going to? Why are they sending this money? But exploitation happens also through Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, and Zelle. And so I thought it was important to mention that, because we as adults and professionals, we use these apps every single day. I know I'm a Cash App girl and a PayPal girl, but we don't think and realize that exploitation is happening as well. And so going to our next slide, thank you so much. And so what should parents do? We're almost wrapping up too, but the first thing I want to say is please don't panic. And I know that is like so easy for me to say as the professional, as the CSEC coordinator, as I'm one that helps coordinate through the multidisciplinary team approach and working with the child abuse unit for the district attorney's office. But the first thing that parents do when they see content and it's graphic, and or they see nudes, or they see that their child is being exploited, or someone is asking for something inappropriate, or you notice that that person is over 18 or they're 40 years old, and you're like, this is a perpetrator that my child's talking to. How did this happen? I can't believe my child would do such a thing. I can't believe my child would even share anything of this nature, of this content online. But the worst thing to do is panic, because then it's going to make that child hide even more. It's going to make that adolescent rather not share any information that could be useful if it was to go to an investigation point. And so what I mean by that is that a lot of times there may be social media names that you're going to need for that child to talk to you about. You're going to need to know how long have they been talking to them, and you don't want them to delete any information that could be useful. If it's not screened in through a 51A, and the parent that's tuning in tonight, if you yourself just call law enforcement, your local police department, wherever your jurisdiction is tonight, if you have a concern and you see that there's some exploitation happening, someone's asked someone for money, someone's asked for an exchange for nudes, and someone's asked them to do something or meet them somewhere, or there's gifts that has been set, or behaviors being changed in your adolescent or a child that you know, it is important that you call law enforcement. You know, they'll help you through that. They'll gather the report, they'll get the information. That can also generate a 51A. And even as it's screened in as CSEC, that allows us to do a certain multidisciplinary approach that allows me to offer families resources, and that opens up an investigation. And so whether that goes anywhere, whether that goes to court in terms of the long-term extreme on the end of the scale, but it's important to realize is that you matter. That is, you as the parent, if you have a concern, your concern is going to be heard and it's going to be taken serious. And so keep all the information, again, that you found on any device. A lot of times parents get nervous and they immediately erase, or they start responding to the person that their child is talking to on the other end. Speak with someone also at the school adjustment counselors. I've had number of referrals that have had school adjustment counselors on this, and this was pre the virtual world. But now more than ever, we need parents to keep a watch. We need you to be at home knowing what your child is doing, what they're seeing, and what they're being exposed to. If the child is already engaging services, speak to them. They can refer. So what I mean by services is if they're already engaging in some sort of therapy, if they're already engaging in some sort of after school resources, or however, we can also refer them. And that clinician, like April herself, who's a CSEC clinician for the Berkshire County Kids Place, which is our local children's advocacy center, they can help refer and make sure that they get the proper resources that they need. Okay, and so set limits on social media, know the devices they're using, especially various usernames. I've already mentioned that. Keep communication open, build a foundation of trust. If your child trusts you, they'll talk to you even if it's uncomfortable, even if they feel embarrassed or shame and or guilty, because a lot of times, even now, even with CSEC, there's a lot of victim blaming and shaming and denying. And so, and you want to make sure that they feel safe. Jackie, I'm ready for the next slide. And I see something in the chat about 51A. I've mentioned this very briefly, but I just want to, as we close out our portion of CSEC, that it's a multidisciplinary coordination, which is under the Safe Harbor provision. And so it requires DCF to immediately report CSEC to the district attorney and law enforcement. It requires a team of professionals like myself, April, law enforcement, Department of Children and Family. That can also be another therapist as well. That can be the PD SANE nurse that will be involved in this coordination. That can be juvenile probation that could be involved in this coordination, but everybody comes together to share the various information that they may have concerning the particular adolescent that has been screened in on the 51A. And the reason why we take a multidisciplinary approach is so that we can offer the best services possible, and especially with the parent. Imagine you as a parent having to navigate this all by yourself. So the multidisciplinary team is kind of like your go-to. And so it requires for us to come together and to convene a plan to make sure that we are best servicing and making sure that that child is safe. And going to the next slide. And again, child is under 18. This is mandated reporting. Concerned child is being exploited and or at risk of being exploited. Includes child porn, exchange of indecent images. DCF will screen it in and respond to child trafficking allegations, and whether or not the alleged offender is a caregiver and or the offender is unknown. So that's important for us to know, and I'm wrapping up. The next slide should be closing. This is a victim-centered approach here at Berkshire County, CSEC, and even April and myself in our county. We believe in a victim-centered approach, and I believe Jackie and Mary Beth believe in the same as we all do our work across the state. This is key, and this is very mindful, is that they are victims. They are victims of this, and so the best interest of the victim is first and foremost. The child is first, being trauma-informed and age-appropriate. And the prosecution of victims for CSEC-related sex offense, including prostitution, is to be avoided if practical. And so I wanted to mention that, and we can go to the next thing. We want to make sure that we listen to the youth. We want to make sure that we hear them, and we want to make sure that we are communicating with their interests in mind. And so because we all serve from our different principles, and as a parent, a lot of times you're only seeing things from your lens, but it's important to see what is happening from the child's perspective. And so very quickly, Berkshire County Child Trafficking Multidisciplinary Team response, the Child Abuse Unit, we suspect some sort of CSEX, some exploitation. It generates a report. They contact us. We do a whole we do a whole MDT response, the youth involvement. It helps us develop recommendations, and we can also do medical evaluations, give them referrals for that, interview the youth, which is the forensic interview, also known as the SANE interview. The main thing to know today from the CSEC lens is that it's not something new. It's important for us to talk about. It's not something to be afraid of. And we want to make sure that parents today are educated on this topic. It is not an out of sight of the United States issue. It is right here in Massachusetts, and we want to make sure that you have all the tools and the access. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. I'm so glad you went into depth about kind of how, not only how it happens, but then what happens after when something is reported. I think that's important to know. And of course, we want parents to know too that they have choices along the way, and that I'm sure Berkshire County operates like Suffolk in that along with child first means that if a child or family doesn't want court involvement, we never force anyone to, go through the court process if they're not comfortable or feeling okay about that. So we don't want people to not report because they're worried about what comes down the road. We want to help you each step of the way. Should you need to report something or call the police. So let's just couple quick more things about online examples, and then we're going to go into more conversations and resources for you. That's going to wrap up the presentation, okay? So Nikita mentioned Omegle. This is a site that if you ask a teen, they may or may not roll their eyes and say, oh yeah, there's creeps on there. But young kids maybe don't realize how kind of creepy Omegle can be, but it's definitely a site that, look at the tagline here, talk to strangers. So it is a site that encourages kids to kind of spin a wheel and just land on a stranger, and then they chat. And the problem is if you go on the site, it can turn sexual very quickly. Not only can it turn sexual, but people exchange other ways to contact. So you go on Omegle, you don't have to sign in, you're talking with a stranger, they don't know who you are, but as soon as you give your Snapchat name or as soon as you give your Instagram address, they can connect you in another way. So we want to talk to kids about, first of all, these talk to stranger sites are not appropriate, they're not safe. But if they do find themselves on it, right? One of their friends logged on, one of their friends thought it was funny. We want to talk to them about what to do if something does make them uncomfortable, and about not sharing personal information if they do find themselves on one of these sites. And as we talk about exploitation, again, I think every panelist has said we don't want to overwhelm anyone, but we also don't think it's fair for you and your children not to have information. Because I know when I'm interviewing a child, sometimes I wish that some prevention work had been done, because maybe if families knew a little bit more about what's out there, then they wouldn't even get in the situation in the first place. So this is an example on TikTok where there's some material and topics on TikTok that maybe aren't extremely healthy. There are profiles that encourage things like anorexia and restricting food, and people can go on them and kind of compare how little food they ate on a certain day. And there's kind of codes, pro-ana means pro-anorexia, just something to be aware of. But let's say you're a child, and let's say you do go on this TikTok page. And let's say you are struggling with something, whether it is an eating disorder or something else, and you contact the person who made this video and you say, I know what you're going through, I'm sorry, and I can we talk about it? And you connect that way. How do we know that this person is really a teen who is struggling with anorexia? We don't. And what if this is actually an exploiter who is kind of setting a trap, if you will, for a young person to divulge personal information that will then be used to continue the relationship and to maybe get things from them. So when kids start divulging personal information and start sharing things that maybe they don't share with everyone else, maybe they keep from their family and friends, it creates this situation where an exploiter can use it against them, as other panelists have mentioned. So we want to teach children that while we do recognize that they can meet people that they have things in common with, when they are divulging things, they're giving other people some power, especially if they divulge things and then share a picture, or they, you know, even the secret that they're sharing is something that can be used. And it's another reason why we want to teach kids not to have personal information on these pages. Because if a perpetrator gets connected to a kid and wants to threaten them, if they don't know their personal information, that kid can block them and not have to see them again. So again, keeping things vague, not using maybe real names, and certainly not talking about, you know, cities and towns and schools and things like that. So that was just kind of our final couple online examples as we go into our wrap up. So sorry, go ahead, Mary Beth.
No, I was so the approach to all of this really, again, as we've reiterated throughout, is just how important it is to help youth understand that you are someone that they can go to talk about gaming, to talk about social media. I think oftentimes youth might think, oh my gosh, like this happened to me on Snapchat, my parent would never understand because they don't even know how to, you know, log on to XYZ, or they've never had a profile. But by really helping them understand that you are someone they can talk to about anything in a space that's free of judgment, blame, and anger, it can be really helpful just to help them understand, you know, while you might be feeling really panicky or upset, just as Nikita mentioned, how important it is not to panic. You might be feeling that way, but it's really helpful to just step away for a minute, take a deep breath, and return to the conversation so that the way you present to the child when they're disclosing this kind of information to you is really in a supportive and calm manner so that they don't just close up and not want to talk about it. Some things you could say are just like with other forms of abuse, if they're, you know, whether it's they're disclosing something that happened online versus disclosing, you know, sexual abuse that happened in real life or in person, you would want to say things like, I'm so glad you told me. I want to help you through this, you know, no matter what happened, I love you. But again, avoiding like that anger, shock, and shame. We don't want to say things like, how could you do that? Or why didn't you do that? Like, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because saying like, why did you do that? Or why didn't you tell me sooner? Introduces this level of self-blame where the child thinks it's their fault for letting it continue to happen or letting it happen in the first place, when really the responsibility, the onus is on the exploiter or the person who abused the child. So when we're talking to youth, you know, just help them walk through scenarios. What would you do if someone sent you a nude? You could advise them to, if you don't know the person, just delete it, report it. You know, I think particularly if they know the youth who's depicted in the image, like if it's a friend and the image got circulated through the school, especially make sure you report it to an adult that you trust, because we want to get that youth help. But really just block people if anything is uncomfortable. If someone's asking you for a nude image, again, we're coming back to this stop, block, and talk. So stop, is it really worth the risk? Block anyone who's making you feel uncomfortable, who keeps asking you for a nude image, and talk if it's bothering you or if something happens.
And we also want to recognize that we're talking to parents and guardians of all different ages of young people. And it's really important for a 9, 10, 11-year-old, if they get a nude image, to talk to you about it, right? And to report it, maybe, just depending on where it came from. 16, 17, 18-year-olds, unfortunately, if they're online, they're seeing nudes and they're getting nudes. And it might be a little unrealistic to expect them to tell you every single time. And this is how common it is. They get, you know, an unsolicited picture of someone's private part, but we still want to encourage them to do so, especially if it's bothering them. But the younger the child, the more important it is that we are talking to them about it. And if they have a phone and chat and play games, we need to tell them that this stuff happens.
And so really just getting back to the stop, block, and talk with Block, walk through these apps with them. Like, just like you would practice other safety scenarios with them, from a young age, can you go on these gaming systems with them and locate the blocking and reporting features or how to flag inappropriate behavior? Because ultimately this is preparing them so that if something bad does happen, if they receive something that's really jarring or mean, they know exactly where to go, and don't have to think twice, and they can block them immediately. And it's also helpful just for you to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly like anything else in life that you want to teach a child. It's more effective if you do it with them. If you're going to teach a child how to throw a baseball, you're not just going to tell them how to throw the baseball. You're going to go out and maybe throw the baseball with the child, or at least that's maybe what the best method might be. We're not going to just tell children what to do. We need to actually download the apps, go on the apps with kids and go through and actually look at the different screens, maybe find examples. Oh, look at this picture. Should this person have posted this? And we're doing it with a positive spin too. Oh, that's cool. It's not all negative. It's fun. Let's find funny videos, but let's also look, if this made us uncomfortable, where's the button that we would know how to block someone with? They can probably teach you a lot of this.
So these are just some examples of conversation starters, and we'll send these out in handouts after this, but there are really lots of ways you can open the conversation just by getting invested and getting interested in what they're doing. It can be really fun to walk through, like, what's your favorite YouTuber right now? What's the funniest video you've seen on TikTok? And then from there, just getting deeper and deeper into the conversation, asking things like, has anything ever happened online that made you feel uncomfortable or unsafe? I think in the next slide, some of the examples talk through, if you ever have posted a picture that made you feel embarrassed, or has anyone posted anything of you? And you're really just kind of going through these different scenarios, again, to prepare them, and also just to clue them in that you're open to talking about these topics with them.
Yeah, and you're not waiting for a problem to happen. You're talking about it ahead of time. And it's so great. And, even if you have a teenager that's a little bit difficult to talk to, meaning they don't want to have anything to do with you right now, they just want to be on their phone. If you can show some real sincere interest in something like TikTok or YouTube, it actually does become fun to go on and learn who this streamer is and who this person is and how they, talk about, I don't know, a certain game. It's fun, and pretty soon you'll have them coming to you to show you something. And how amazing would that be for a child to actually, especially a teenager, to go, hey, I want to show you this, look at this. It's really amazing if you learn about the apps, the conversations that you can have with young people. So like Mary Beth said, these are just more suggestions of talking for when talking to children about some language you can use. A lot of parents ask about monitoring software, and we want to stop for a minute and tell you that we actually do not recommend monitoring software. You know your family and child the best. If you think that is the approach that your child needs, we would not tell you not to do that. That's what you should do. But our advice is to approach this with an understanding of trust. However, that's different than parental controls. So spying on a child, monitoring software means you are buying or downloading software that's going to alert you when your child does something or says something. Maybe that's good, especially the younger the child. Maybe that's okay for a young child getting their first phone. But if you're going to do that, first of all, we're going to recommend that you tell the child that you have this software so that it's not a surprise when you do say to them, hey, how did this happen? What is this? It's only good once. The surprise is only good once, and they know you have the software. Why not start from a position of trust and tell them, we have this, it's just for your safety. I don't think you're doing anything wrong, but it's because other people sometimes do things. But we're gonna say, actually, parental controls are key. That means going into Xbox, going into PlayStation. The younger the child, the more important it is to put parental controls. That means you're preventing them from even getting online messages from someone that you haven't approved. A lot of you probably have young people with phones that are connected with yours and the app store connected with yours. You have to approve the apps that they download onto their phone. That's great. Those are parental controls. Now, the older they get, the more you need to know they're getting around those parental controls, right? Even if you put the best parental controls on your child's device, they have a friend whose parents don't use parental controls. So you have to assume that they're still going to have access to a lot of things out there. And again, the more kind of wide their circle is and the more friends and older siblings and all of that they have, the more important it is to talk to them as if, yes, this is something that lowers the risk, but it is not the just blanket solution to online issues. We need to talk to kids about them and really build that trust about them coming to you. Oh, these are funny, quick examples of how kids do get around software, and they're in these examples kind of way beyond the parents' capabilities of controlling. So Common Sense Media, we're going to talk about resources here for a minute, and I'll invite Nikita and April to join us if there are any specific sites or resources in Berkshire that anybody would like to talk about. But we all, like we said when we started, our jurisdictions are important to us, but we care about kids everywhere and we use some of the same resources, and you know, we want to make sure that you have the right tools in your hands. So Common Sense Media is a great one. And Common Sense Media will also take you through different movies, different books and things so that you can search up a certain game, and then they'll help you build those controls or guide you through the different controls, because I know that can feel overwhelming. One of the handouts that we suggest taking a look at and using, especially maybe with a young person, is the Stop Block Talk handout, which will again summarize quickly the Stop Block Talk approach. And you can also encourage your child to take a picture of this phone. And these resources apply, they actually go beyond our state lines. These are national kind of text hotlines and crisis lines that we think are great for young people to have. I know we'd want to think that they'd come to us and talk to us if something was bothering them or they needed help. And a lot of times they will, but a lot of times they won't. And they might just need to text someone really quick to kind of talk through something. And so it's great if they can have these national kind of jurisdiction doesn't matter resources right in a picture or right on their phone if they need them.
Yeah, and so we also are excited to have a Stop Block and Talk or online safety themed coloring book. So I just put a link in the chat. You'll get all of these handouts and stuff after the event if you are watching on Zoom, if you registered on Zoom. But it's also on our website, so you can download these and print them out. We have a version in English and a version in Spanish, just as a way to like start the conversation. You know, I think coloring books now they're great for all ages. It doesn't have to just be for the young kids, and it could be incorporated as just like a fun and relaxing activity. And each page has an important message on the bottom that can help spark conversation. And so the nationalonlinesafety.com is another great resource. I believe I put that link in the chat as well, and you're going to get this after the event too. National Online Safety is actually based out of the UK, but it just has so many great guides on there that really break down, as we talked about earlier, like all of the apps and what the biggest concerns are to have on each and how to be safe on each.
And if you are interested in those specific guides, this is their homepage. You see the word there, guides, that's what you click on, and you can get all these guides.
Yeah, and we don't want you to leave here, as we all said, feeling all anxious. There are so many things you can do to help kids be safer online. We'd encourage you, if you haven't used some of these, to download Instagram, download TikTok, Snapchat, whatever it is. If you want to just help get more comfortable with it, you can always delete your profile afterwards. If you don't want to download them yourself, you could also just look at the kid's device with them and help, you know, have them walk through it with you and maybe show some of their favorite pages to you, and just scroll around. I think like real experience can also be a great teaching tool. We also have an Instagram page at Stop Block Talk if you want to follow along for some of our latest messaging. And just, schedule time, make this part of an open, regular conversation each week. It doesn't have to be a one-time conversation. And just have fun with it, teach them about good choices as you would with other things in their life, and model that as well. So model it by you can't just be sharing public information on your own profiles and then tell your kid to have a private profile, but like model that behavior in your own life, maybe look into your own settings and your own behavior online as well.
And you see these little index cards that are on this slide. When we go to schools, sometimes we give them index cards and we say, after our presentation, if you have any questions or things you want to talk about, please put them down. And they are furiously writing. They have so many questions about social media and gaming. And I think so many of them are a little bit worried to talk to their parents or guardians about it, or worried even to talk to their teachers. And I think a lot of that is legitimate concern that they're going to get in trouble or someone's going to get mad at them. And it's so great if you, as the adult in their life, can give them that space where they know they can ask you a question without you, just freaking out because you're mad about them playing a certain game or something. They really do want to talk to you about this stuff. So just be relaxed, like everyone has said, slow down and really have fun. And these are just our individual emails at the Suffolk DA's office. And I'm sure you're going to get April and Nikita's emails and websites. I know theirs is on one of the slides.
And I just wanted to answer one of the questions. All the links that have been shared in the chat, those are going to get sent to you after the presentation when all the resources get sent.
All right, thanks everybody. Should we move on to the Q&A now? So we have a bunch of questions that people have asked already. And for those of you that haven't written any questions, now's a great time to put them into the Q&A. So one of the questions that came from somebody is, what about a teenager? What about a teenager has done all the things they shouldn't do? I don't know what else to do. She doesn't talk to me. Instead, she hides things. So what advice would you give that parent?
I mean, my first instinct is, just think of when you were a teenager and maybe how hard it was for you to be completely open and honest with your parent. Whether you are a parent or a grandparent, whatever your role is, it can be really embarrassing, or you might feel ashamed to disclose like certain things that are happening online. So one thing I would suggest is help walk them through, maybe are there other trusted adults in their life, or an older sibling, an older cousin that they do feel comfortable talking to, maybe, and you could connect with that person to then follow up and see if there are any concerns that you need to address. But it can be really hard, right? Because we want to be that trusted adult. We want to be the one that they come to. But if you're finding that, you're just hitting a wall with that, sometimes it's helpful to identify someone else.
Super. Thanks, Mary Beth. So here's another one. How do you keep all inappropriate content for as long as necessary without taking device completely away from a child for a long time?
So the question is, how do you prevent them from seeing the inappropriate content? I think if that's the question, how do you prevent them? It's only a matter of time that they're going to see some inappropriate content. And again, just the whole point is to empower them to know what to do when they do see inappropriate content, and to talk to them at a younger age than maybe you thought necessary about what is out there. Because we don't want 9 and 10-year-olds learning about sex from YouTube. And we don't want them seeing pornography and thinking that that is a depiction of a healthy relationship. So we actually have to have these conversations at the younger age. And as they develop, get more specific, more detailed, certainly use the resources that we give you that guide you through that content. But you can't think about this. Even if you take away the device, are they ever going to be around friends? Are they ever going to be around others? We can't think of just because our child doesn't have the device on them right now, that they won't ever be exposed. Because you can't watch them all the time, and you can't be with your child all the time, and that's not how it works. So
Thank you. Here's another one, and I think maybe this is for Nikita and April. Can you please talk about explicit consequences of not taking the precautions you're recommending? Real life issues that have come up. As a parent, if you're not taking the precautions.
You know, some of the precaution on the high end of scale of things, you know, you could have a youth that just does not, you know, return home, in terms of a runaway or one that's exposed, or a child that's a victim to trafficking. The other part of that is that, you know, they become completely shut down. So they're not talking to anybody about what's happening. They just isolate even further. And so now they're not even talking to friends about what's going on. And now they don't even have any access to get help, indoor resources. And so they're avoiding all the ways that they can get help or what's available. So if a parent is not taking the precaution that we mentioned tonight, it's not that you're doing anything wrong per se, but the reason why we're telling you to take this particular route is that there's other people professionally that can help you, and that can help you get to the information that you need. So even if you don't know exactly what to do, talk to somebody. We know what to do. We can help you navigate this.
Nikita, I love your dog in the background.
I'm sorry, he's a puppy and he's
It's okay. It's really lovely that he sort of joined you. So just one last question, and then we're going to swing. Nikita, you're going to jump in after this one.
Okay.
And I know you sort of mentioned that, you know, not putting specific programs in there, but other programs to monitor screen time. This is a very specific thing. So I don't know if you guys know the answer to that question.
you can monitor screen time through your provider. So for example, if the family uses Verizon and kids are watching, or I'm sorry, the internet provider is what I mean. So yeah, if the family's using Verizon internet, Comcast internet, there are family features through all these providers. They will not only limit screen time for you, but limit certain sites, limit all kinds of things. They have pages and pages and pages of options that you as a parent can go through and set. It takes a little while. So schedule yourself for 2 hours one day to really sit down and dive into them. But yes, the specific tablets and devices, if it wasn't something through your provider, I don't know of anything that can be done kind of outside of that. But what I know the most of is the provider limits.
That's accurate, Jackie. It's
Okay.
definitely your provider is going to be the best way for parents to be able to monitor. And also you can set their amount time. So you give them allotted time. So for instance, after school and they're done with virtual, if you give them from 5 to 7, at 7 o'clock, you can have it set to where it shuts down. So I think that's important to know.
Yeah, you can turn it off from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now, don't forget, the savvy child might have another cell phone, right?
Exactly.
So if you hear something going on in the bedroom and you hear a chatter or talk, they might have snuck another phone in or found a way around it, but you certainly can try to make it more difficult and try to encourage them to not have a device between 10 and 6 or whatever it might be.
Okay, thanks. And there's some great questions in there, but unfortunately we don't have enough time for everybody to answer them. So I'm going to save the questions, and I'm going to sort of compile it and see if we can figure out a way of answering it, and I'll sort of send it back to folks. I'll sort of figure that out. But with that said, we've got to move on to Nikita now, and she's going to give us sort of wrap up for the evening, and then it's going to go back to me for a couple just last words. So thanks you guys for answering all those questions, and Nikita, I'm passing it to you.
All right. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Mass Support for having us in this space tonight. What a privilege and an honor to represent my jurisdiction and where I'm from in April as well. And to Mary Beth and to Jackie, I've enjoyed your presentation. I think we just had a dynamic time. And so what we want to leave everybody with, and I know it's hard because we threw some serious topics at you tonight, and it was very heavy. It was not a light, fluffy, let's talk about rainbows and Skittles tonight, but it was definitely challenging. But now more than ever, these are the conversations that we need to have, and who better than us to do so. And so we want to make sure that you leave here tonight knowing now I have a few more resources. I have a few more tools to access that maybe I didn't have prior to coming into this room tonight. And so not just from a preventative phase or an intervention phase, but maybe a parent is going to call you months down the road. Maybe a parent's going to call you and maybe they have that fear and they have that panic. And now you as a parent and all the hope, you can share with them that you sat here tonight and now you know 3 or 4 more resources. And even if it's one resource that you take away from tonight, or even if it's one example from all the things that we talked about tonight that stays in mind, that is all the impact that we hope that we are able to give to you. And so as long as we're able to give you information that you can share, you can start having conversations with, you can start monitoring your youth, and not that you leave here scared, but that you leave here hopeful, because now you have power and now you have information. And so there's no need to have fear when now I have the information. And so tonight with Mass Support being the headline, being the frontliner, Mass Support is an amazing resource for family. Please connect with them, connect with us in our various principals from District Attorney Office, from the Child Advocacy Center, even from your child's therapy, even from the school department. Whoever you are and wherever you are, just know that you are not alone. And I think that is the main thing that we wanted every parent to take away tonight. You are not alone. We are here for you. And there are people and places that you can talk to. And there are people that are interested in making sure that your child stays safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. And I just want to remind everybody that Mass Support is here for you as well. And I want to tell you about coping groups that we're starting actually next week. And there are 4 groups that we're doing. One is those people that are feeling isolated during the pandemic. It's geared towards them. And then we have another one for parents and guardians who are homeschooling. We have COVID-19 survivors. And we have one that's geared towards healthcare and mental health providers. So I want to thank you guys. I just feel like there was so much information that came at us tonight. And I want to extend, first of all, thanks to all of you who there's a lot of choices that we have about how we're going to spend our evening. And the fact you chose to spend it with us is so meaningful. So I can speak on behalf of everybody that we so appreciate you being here. And I especially want to thank my panelists. It was such a humble and amazing experience working with you guys. So thank you so much. And all the information, we've said it many times, but all the information that you heard tonight is going to come out in an email. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us and reach out to Mass Support for any support as well. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Playing on your iPad, if something makes you feel sad.